Good evening, committee members. I'm Kathleen Mallory, Planning and Sustainability Manager, and this evening I'll be providing the committee with an update on the city's work to prepare an expanded polystyrene ban, known as an EPS ordinance. EPS is commonly known as styrofoam. The city's work to prepare the EPS ordinance is an outcome of the city's climate action and adaptation plan. Development of the expanded polystyrene ordinance, or EPS ordinance, supports environmental goals and addresses litter and pollution in the community. Staff's recommended ordinance focuses on EPS in 2 steps. Step 1 would be a ban on EPS, or single-use flexible plastic, which is commonly used for single-use plates, cups, takeout food containers, commonly referred to as clamshell food containers, as well as packing materials generated within the city. The ordinance would regulate non-encased EPS products, for example, EPS used to manufacture flimsy or non-encased styrofoam coolers. Step 2 would occur in the future and would include the regulation of rigid plastics, such as flexible drink straws, drink lids, and plastic cutlery. Ordinance development would occur when Ventura County processing facilities become operational and compostable recycling markets are available locally to handle this product. EPS is slow to degrade. It leaches chemicals into the environment, and it results in degradation and contribution of litter and pollutions in the environment. It also breaks down into smaller microscopic particles called microplastics. EPS is distinguishable because it is very fragile and it easily breaks into many pieces. Those pieces are often found in oceans, streams, and overall in the environment, and degrades to the environment. 10% of 18 trillion pounds of plastic produced worldwide is being recycled. And many California jurisdictions have enacted ordinances to reduce EPS commonly used through single-use disposable plastics. The city of Oxnard is its own waste hauler. The city recycles most hard plastics except polystyrene products, or EPS. Trash and EPS products are disposed of at the Simi Valley landfill. Within Ventura County, the cities of Thousand Oaks, Ojai, Ventura, Camarillo, and the county of Ventura have developed EPS ordinances. Only the city of Ojai has developed both an EPS ordinance and rigid plastic ban. The cities of Moorpark, Santa Paula, Simi Valley, and Port Hueneme do not have plans to adopt an ordinance, either due to staff resources or council priority. Staff intends to develop a progressive EPS ordinance approach. We'll first focus on step 1 of EPS ordinance development, because there are locally recyclable and compostable facilities that exist in Ventura County. The ordinance would include EPS product containers, serviceware for takeout of leftovers, clamshells, bowls, plates, tray cartons, cups, and beverage containers. Non-encased EPS coolers would also be included in the ban. In terms of what is exempted from the proposed staff EPS ordinance approach, items that would be exempted include food packaging materials that are prepared outside of the city limits, any emergency supplies that are imported into the city that contain EPS, or EPS that is utilized as a result of a local declared emergency. Further, Some construction products that are used to comply with city and state codes and regulations may have small amounts of EPS. They would also be exempted from the ordinance. An example of that would be a storm drain wattle that might have a very small amount of EPS, and those would be exempted. Materials generated outside of the city, including shipping boxes or pool or beach toys, or packing peanuts or other packaging materials that are generated outside of the city and then shipped in, would be exempt. EPS containers that are commonly used to hold and store foods or of meat or fish or poultry, basically the EPS container or plate would be exempt. If those items are altered within the city to further divide that product, they would have to comply. But in instances of use and generation from outside of the city and then just brought in and not altered in any way, those containers would be exempt. Foodware, plastic utensils, or plastic beverage straws, which are bought by individuals for personal consumption. So someone who has a lunch at school and the straw would be as part of their lunch, those items would not be a part of our EPS ordinance. In terms of who would be impacted by the approach we've outlined for the EPS ordinance, it would really focus on food establishments and vendors operating in the city, and it would apply with city events or city festivals in the city. Food establishments can be comprised of grocery stores and supermarkets, restaurants or quick service, drive-through, take out, or dine in. Mobile food trucks or food vendors are proposed to be inclusive of the ban. It would include cafes and, as I mentioned, sit-down or drive-through restaurants, snack shops, public food markets or farmers markets, convenience stores, and mobile places. For example, street and sidewalk vendors or push cart operators would be required to comply. We note that there's approximately 500 potential businesses impacted by through this EPS ordinance. And we do note that the way the ordinance is written at this time, it would apply to our very robust industrial and wholesale restaurant industry, and additional research would need to occur to determine the impact on that industry. And that's proposed through our outreach provisions, which I'll cover in a few minutes. In terms of the implementation of the ordinance, we're recommending that once the ordinance is adopted, that we wait for 6 months to begin an enforcement, and we're calling it a leniency enforcement, which would have happened 6 months to 12 months after adoption. So within the first 6 months, there'll be extensive outreach with the business community, chamber, and any nonprofits. There will be active outreach with those that would potentially be impacted by the ordinance. This, by waiting for 6 months to implement the ordinance, also it helps businesses who maybe have purchased prior non-compliant products to use up their product. Additionally, contracts that might have been assigned for example, like a wedding or an event that would be hosted in the city, those contracts are typically signed in advance. And so it would, by waiting for 6 months to implement the ordinance, it would allow those event contracts to be honored. Then after 6 months, from the month 6 to 12 months after adoption, we would have something called a leniency enforcement provision. What that means is if someone receives a notice of violation and then they are cited to pay a fine, that fine could be offset by showing proof of compliant product purchased in lieu of paying that fine. So someone may be cited to pay a $100 fine. The leniency provision would say, show us receipts of purchasing a compliant product of at least $100, and we will waive then that fine. That proposal, titled leniency enforcement, would end on the 12th month. After 1 year of EPS ordinance adoption, violators would have to pay the Oxnard Municipal Code violation fine in lieu of that compliant product. So in that instance, that example I gave a moment ago, a $100 fine, they would have to pay a $100 fine. They could not provide proof of compliant product as a way to meet the intent of. Hence would also include a hardship or practical difficulty provision, which would allow for phased implementation, but only for nonprofit organizations. The city manager or designee we're recommending that the city manager or designee be able to approve a one-time 1-year exemption of the EPS ordinance for nonprofits only. In terms of next steps, we'll begin community outreach in the spring and summer of this year. We intend to finalize the ordinance in the summer, and then with the goal of EPS ordinance adoption sometime in the summer or fall of this year. Staff's recommendation is that the committee receive an update on the city's efforts to develop an expanded polystyrene ordinance.